Eoghan Corry is on the line, editor of Travel Extra. Good morning to you, Eoghan.
Good morning, Gavin.
And thanks very much for joining us. We're talking Ryanair, the debacle there over the past few days, and a climb down last evening, it seems, or a climb out down of sorts by the union representing the airlines, first of all. Maybe talk us through the weekend as you see it in terms of a big announcement by Ryanair to kick it off on Friday morning.
Yeah, it's a very, very dramatic weekend. The union recognition seems to have caught everyone on the hop. The interesting thing was that has emerged over the weekend, and especially late last night, is that while the Irish Union was stalling and doing what it has used to doing with Aer Lingus, not going into talks about when are the talks going to be, all of that sort of stuff. It's sort of cat and mouse. It's rules of engagement that those of us outside the negotiation room sometimes find strange, but it's not abnormal in industrial relations. What is very interesting is the Portuguese, German, Italian unions all decided to call off their actions. And that really left out on the limb with this action on Wednesday, and late last night they called it off. It looks like their engagement on Tuesday probably will only set out terms of references, things like the terms and conditions. A bit of scare in the union on Friday when they saw one of the clauses on the Ryanair statement. But it does look now that a good deal of the mistrust has been kicked into touch. There's no other word for it, Gavin, because we're nowhere near the end. But to quote the great Sean O'Casey phrase, which was borrowed by Winston Churchill, it's the end of the beginning rather than the beginning of the end.
That's the second time this month we've heard that particular phrase. The interesting part of this, though, surely must be Ryanair's announcement on Friday that it was agreeing to recognise the union. That marks a massive departure by Michael O'Leary.
Okay, working our way through that, the logic behind that. And it appeared, it's flies in the face of Michael O'Leary's I'd cut off an arm rather than talk to the unions. But a lot of what O'Leary has said down the years is bombastic, and that's what gets the headline. There's a lot of intelligence, pragmatism behind that. He once said he'd never closed down the call centre back in the early 90s. It was one of the first things to go. Kenny Jacobs, the marketing man in Ryanair, says 90% of the always getting better, which is their trendy way for saying they're being nice to customers. He said 90% of that are things that Michael O'Leary said never would happen. So he is a pragmatist, and he came around to this. But there is another major player in the Ryanair side that emerged only in the last month. He only joined the airline at the beginning of December, and that's Peter Bellew, a Meath man who ran Malaysia Airlines. He was the CEO of Malaysia Airlines, bringing that out of a crisis mode caused by its two crashes immediately after Christoph Muller. And he's come back from that job to Ryanair. Everybody was a bit surprised. Why did he leave a major CEO role to become second in command in a European airline? But it's quite clear from the Twitter accounts, all these things that really matter nowadays, I don't know why, but they do matter, that Bellew is doing a lot of the running on this. And he's come from an environment where he has dealt with unions on most of the airlines he's worked with, and he's probably putting forward the case that as you grow bigger and bigger, and Ryanair are hitting 120 million passengers this year again, if you grow bigger and bigger, and you don't have a structure for working your way out of disputes, you could end up with a lot of havoc. The real problem with this IALPA strike was that there wasn't a process that would solve it. There wasn't talks which would then break down and go to the LRC and the Labour Court, all the things we're used to in troubled industrial sectors, and aviation is one of the more troubled ones. He needed a process if he's going to continue growing. Okay. He needs that process not just in Ireland but right across Europe, and that's apparently, reading between the lines, what's been happening over the weekend is that Bellew's view that the process should be put in place is much better than being subject to chaos, calls of strikes that nobody knows how many people will participate in, and the impact that has, Gavin, on forward bookings. Because creating uncertainty in the minds of passengers, it benefits the union.
Absolutely. And so does that mean then that the pilots in agreeing to come together in the fashion that they have, did they have Ryanair by the short and curlies then, effectively? And were they striking while they had that advantage?
you have it, but you put your finger on it. Back in September the 13th, listeners will remember Michael O'Leary striding into the press conference saying, I have a rostering problem, but I'm going to solve it.
Yeah.
We won't need any problem because the pilots will all come round. It was quite clear 3 months later, not only were the pilots not coming round, but like everybody, if you see somebody's if you're on the football field and the cornerback is injured, that's where you're going to put your next pass. That's what the pilots were doing. They were working their advantage. They knew it wouldn't last very long, and the interesting thing is they did it on a pan-European basis. That's very unusual in industrial relations, but it does show the level of organisation and the power that aircraft pilots have.
But it's the pilots this week in the new year. Could it be cabin crew? Could it be maintenance staff, etc., etc.? I mean, by opening the door to the pilots, have Ryanair not effectively opened it up to the thousands of staff that they have right across the continent?
Yeah, absolutely. They'll all be looking at that this morning. The way the hierarchy in aviation has a hierarchy like everywhere else. The way the hierarchy works is the pilots are the most influential. They're the ones that really can bring things to a halt. Cabin crew is easier to hire in. There isn't the same level of training required as there are cockpit crew. So all of that is in the equation. They won't have ever the same muscle that the pilots have, but they're certainly looking at what the pilots got and they're saying, why can't we get that as well?
So if that's the case, can Ryanair, as we have known it, continue the low fares model, etc., etc., if they have to start paying better terms and changing some of the practices to their staff, then ultimately will that not require significant change and potentially higher ticket prices for the passenger?
It's quite interesting that the terms and conditions are nothing to do with this. It's about union recognition. It's about power. It's about ego. Our Ryanair pilots were getting €20,000 a year more than Aer Lingus pilots who were unionised, but it was still driving the pilots mad. They didn't have a union presence in Ryanair that they could use to their advantage in negotiation. So terms and conditions might not actually improve. They could disimprove with unionisation. But the low-cost model doesn't need to be non-union. The Southwest is the airline in which Ryanair's entire business model is based. That's where Michael O'Leary went on his internship to see how it worked, and they've always dealt with unions. I had a conversation with Michael O'Leary some years ago. I said, what is it about unions? Southwest have them. And he said, well, maybe Southwest are going soft and fat and middle-aged. And I think a few people this weekend might be levelling the same accusation against Michael O'Leary. It's not the Michael O'Leary we used to know.
So how do you see this playing out then finally in the year ahead?
This is not good news for passengers. It means that we have the union has a position to bully passengers, call a strike date. The strike mightn't happen, but now they have the workplace protection to do so under legislation, and they can use this to try and push any advantage they can against Michael O'Leary. It will mean disruption. Aviation is one of the most strike-prone industries there is because it's heavily unionised, and I can see trouble down the line. And instead of being bullied by Michael O'Leary, the passengers are going to be bullied by the trade union as well. The two bullies in the schoolyard is always bad news. It was in St. Anne's National School in the 1970s when I was there, and it's bad for aviation passengers today.
Eoghan, happy Christmas. Thanks for joining us this morning.